Alright, we got a video here from the Video Game Guy today, and this is every retro Nintendo console launch explained. This could be interesting.
Color TV game. Before the Famicom, Nintendo learned how to be a hardware company by shipping bright orange plastic boxes into Japanese living rooms. Between 1977 and 1980, the Color TV game line delivered simple, hardwired play.
I don't actually remember these. Now, just going by basic Nintendo history, I think they started just over 100 years ago as like a game company, amusement, card games, things like that. And then I know the Famicom and the Game & Watch, but I didn't realize they did anything like this beforehand. At least I didn't remember anyway, so this is really interesting. They look like
No
Pong
cartridges,
consoles.
no downloads. Just Pong-style tennis,
Oh, right, it
hockey,
is.
and quirky twists. The models came fast. Color TV Game 6, Color TV Game 15, Racing 112, Block Kuzushi.
Oh, I think I've seen the Racing 1112 before. Now, I don't know if it was released in Australia or as an import, but I vaguely remember seeing that when I was young. Never played it. But with the look, it kind of reminds me of those old Tommy driving sets. You know how you'd have like the gear and the steering wheel and you'd have that little cardboard cutout car go along with it. I used to love those things. I'm getting those vibes from that without the screen. But yeah, apart from that, I don't know these things.
And the computer TV game. Each revision shaved costs, tightened manufacturing, and taught Nintendo how to design for durability and mass production. The hook wasn't power, it was price. These sets were cheap fun during Japan's late 70s TV game craze, and together they sold in the millions. No one would call the Color TV game glamorous. You got a couple of knobs.
You see, you always get given the figures in North America for things like, the Atari, Magnavox Odyssey, all those other old school Pong consoles. But you forget there's like a whole world in Asia, including and especially in Japan. And I didn't know any of this history. This is really interesting.
A handful of modes, and that was it. But this humble line proved Nintendo could build consumer electronics at scale and profit. The Famicom didn't appear out of nowhere. It stood on these orange boxes like a launchpad. Game & Watch. Before cartridges and clamshells, Nintendo learned pocket magic with Game & Watch.
That was such a fun memory, like the single screen Game & Watch, and then the awesome double screen Game & Watch games too. Like you had a double screen Donkey Kong game, which was awesome. And then you also had a really famous one, Oil Panic, which was the white double screen Game & Watch. But then I had single screen games as well, like Cement Factory, I think it was. There was also another single screen green Donkey Kong one. They're all pretty good. I mean, they don't really hold up now. I made the mistake of getting a couple of these after a Nintendo, and they just didn't compare. But it was fun playing these with the kids at school. Sometimes kids would come to school with a whole lunchbox of these. It was absolutely awesome.
Starting in 1980, engineer Gunpei Yokoi turned low-power LCDs into palm-sized time wasters that doubled as, well, a clock. One unit, one game. Ball, parachute, octopus, Donkey Kong.
But you could get the no-name ones as well from places like Kmart and stuff for like $10 Australian, $15 Australian, just like race cars across the screen or play baseball. It was pretty good value. I remember these were pretty expensive in some places in Australia because if you went to the wrong place, they tried to charge you the same price for it as what an NES game would be. It was a total rip-off in the end.
Simple loops that begged for one
more
more
I remember
try.
Parachute.
They were cheap, durable, and everywhere. For Donkey Kong, 1982,
Yeah,
Yokoi's team
look at
introduced
that.
the cross-shaped D-pad, a precise, thumb-friendly solution that later defined the NES controller and basically every handheld after. The multi-screen layout,
So
two
cool.
stacked displays with a hinge, quietly wrote the blueprint the Nintendo DS would follow 2 decades later.
And I think that Donkey Kong Game & Watch is worth hundreds of dollars now. And I mean, the last time I checked on eBay was probably close to a decade ago, but they were already selling for like $300 plus if they're in good condition. So if you've got the Game & Watches, guys, hold on to them. You might be able to trade them in for some pennies.
Game & Watch games were brutally simple by today's standards, but that was the point. Instant feedback, rising...
And you also would get the ones that came with the 2 controllers as well. Like, I remember my uncle had this boxing game, and you'd had the big wide screen, like an LCD screen like this. Then you'd have like 2 controllers and little mini controllers, and you could fight each other. There were a couple games that came out in that line as well. Think like right before the Famicom, but okay.
Tension, a score chasing your last best run. More than trinkets, they were Nintendo's first masterclass in cost, feel, and focus. The 3 pillars the company would ride into the Famicom era and beyond. Famicom/NES. Summer 1983 in Japan. A red and white plastic box lands in living rooms and
I mean, that thing looks cool. I would have loved to have owned one of those, but I mean, there's just nothing beats the Nintendo toaster, right? I'm surprised that they're showing the Japanese model. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, it would have been nice to see the North American, European models for nostalgia, but it's okay.
Rewrites the rules. Nintendo calls it the family computer, Famicom for short.
Sure.
2 hardwired pads, a crisp D-pad, cartridges that click with purpose. 2 years later,
I think we did
a gray
better colours-wise.
VCR-looking twin shows up in North America as the Nintendo Entertainment System. Then the games hit. Super Mario Bros. Turns side-scrolling into a language. The Legend of Zelda hides a battery and a golden world inside a cart.
I mean, not only do you get such a great adventure of Legend of Zelda, we got to remember having like a battery backup save back when it was published in 1986. That was awesome. Not having to write down annoying passwords. Wish Kid Icarus and Metroid did that too.
Metroid makes passwords feel like secret codes. The NES controller. Simple cross, 2 buttons, start/select, becomes muscle memory for an entire generation. The NES had sold over 60 million units, and reset
What, 60 million? So that's pretty impressive in the 80s. Because don't forget, in the 80s, gaming was for like nerds, misfits, kids. You know, if you told a girl that you were dating, oh, I like Nintendo, she probably would have left you in the 80s and tried to find an alpha chat. I'm not saying all girls didn't like video games or Nintendo, but it was considered to still be a very childish, a not cool, nerdy hobby. And so the fact that they managed to still sell 60 million units in the 80s before it fully got totally acceptable mainstream, that's nuts.
Expectations for what a home console could be. It wasn't just a comeback. It was a clean slate. From chipset to checkout line, Famicom NES taught the world that consistency is a superpower. Game Boy. In 1989, Nintendo shipped a gray brick with a pea green screen and changed handheld gaming.
There was just something so charming about this. Hey, I didn't get a Game Boy until the very late 90s, and by then you had the Game Boy Pocket. It was slimline, didn't take too many batteries, actually had a rechargeable battery on it, and the screen was a really good quality. The original Game Boy was a little bit of a bulky mess, I guess, in design. Didn't even have a screen that would light up. You had to get the light boy and everything. But it was just so charming. Just something about having friends bring it to school and just having a run of Tetris or playing a little bit of golf or whatever other game was on it. It was really special. Again, the kids would always come with a big lunchbox of like Game Boy games or a folder, so to speak. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, you didn't have to worry about theft or thugs as much stealing your games, so that was kind of cool. And it's just such a great memory. Great sound too. Yeah, wonderful.
Forever. No backlight. No color, 4 AA batteries, and somehow it felt unstoppable. The trick wasn't raw power, it was endurance. Where flashier rivals burned bright and died quick, Game Boy ran for dozens of hours, shrugged off backpacks, and survived schoolyard drops.
Dude, right? Like that big bulky Game Boy. You think if there was a nuclear bomb or something, the only thing that would be left on Earth is the cockroaches and the Game Boy unit, right? You think about it, if you owned an Atari Lynx, or a Game Gear at the time, and you dropped it, you'd be pretty sure it smashed, that's it, game over. But there's just something about the Game Boy that just gives you comfort knowing how sturdy it is, for sure.
Champ. Then Nintendo packed it with Tetris. Suddenly the system wasn't just for kids. It was in briefcases, on airplanes, hypnotizing anyone who touched it.
Used to take
Falling blocks turned the Game Boy into a cultural handshake. You got next?
The design was pure focus, a crisp D-pad, 2 face buttons, instant boot, and cartridges that clicked with authority. The link cable quietly rewired social play. Head-to-head Tetris today.
Ah, yeah. So it was the first time you had link cables, so you could play head-to-head and Tetris and stuff. The catch was actually having a friend that would have the same game as you. Like, gaming was still pretty expensive at the time, but I mean, that was still an option, right? Unfortunately, I never used the link cable with any of my friends. But one thing that it popularized the link cable was later in the Game Boy's life, because you could trade Pokemon and things like that with other people, right? And that was a game changer. By then, the Game Boy was already almost obsolete. It was just like Pokemon probably kept it on the map longer than it should have. But, yeah, great memory, link
Pokemon
cable.
trading tomorrow. Game Boy didn't win because it was the most advanced. It won because it fit life. Toss it in a bag, fire it up in a line, share a match during lunch. Simple, sturdy, everywhere. A handheld that made time feel shorter and commutes feel like levels.
Good memories.
Super Nintendo. In 1990, Nintendo answered the 16-bit drums with the Super Famicom, a gray curve of plastic that landed in North America as the Super Nintendo a year later.
I tell you what, Nintendo hit lightning in the bottle with their timing, because Sega made the first stride. I mean, technically Turbo Graphics, we didn't have that in Australia, but Sega made the strides in the 16-bit era, right? In late 88, early 1989. And Nintendo was still riding the momentum of like NES. And it's like, well, they didn't need to bring out another console because Nintendo was still selling really well. The games were still flying off the shelf. And by then, it started becoming a bit of a cheaper option too. So like working families were swaying towards Nintendo because the new Sega system was a little bit more expensive. Especially North America. Like Master System was really popular in Australia. North America, not as much. So anyway, and so by the time the Nintendo kind of outstayed its welcome, it was probably about 2 years, maybe a year and a half after the launch of the Sega Genesis. And so to have that extra development time and also, like, I guess you could say, progress in technology and everything, Nintendo were able to release a beastie console with the Super Nintendo. And Sega did a great job of keeping up with the quality of games, but performance-wise, Nintendo trumped Sega in every way, whether it was the colors, the sound, everything.
Later, it didn't shout specs, it showed tricks. Mode 7 spun racetracks and world maps like magic carpets. The color palette bloomed. Sprites stretched, rotated in fake 3D long before polygons took over. The controller added shoulder buttons,
how nice
a
is
small
that
hinge
controller?
that changed action games forever.
I tell you what, when it comes to controllers, the Super Nintendo controller is still really comfortable. And obviously you need the extra buttons today, but don't they have the special version of this for PC where you also have the trigger buttons at the back? I don't know, I just think the Super Nintendo controller is one of the best controllers ever made outside of the modern era.
Dash on a trigger, items on a tap. Camera nudges years later traced back to this pad. Then came the software flex. Super Mario World stitched secrets into every corner. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past made two worlds feel like one puzzle. FX chips tucked into cartridges turned Star Fox into a low-poly thunderhead, while Donkey Kong Country made pre-rendered sprites look like clay come to...
So it was just so cutting edge, wasn't it? And I wasn't even a Super Nintendo fanboy, but cutting edge graphics for a platformer here like Donkey Kong, cutting edge adventure game like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, keep people hours learning how to play that game. Mario World basically, took what was already the best Mario game in Mario 3 and made it even better. And then you've got all these 16-bit experiences that were so cutting edge at the time. And, Sega was kind of like a jack of all trades, whereas the Super Nintendo, it had some rubbish on it, but they just excelled in every single genre. It's nuts.
To life. RPGs, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, gave the system a heartbeat you could save to
I'm
memory.
not a big Earthbound
Nintendo
guy.
also learned pacing. Fewer rushed sequels, more killer anchors with Capcom, Konami, and Square firing on all cylinders. By the time the 16-bit era closed, SNES felt timeless, not old. A console that didn't just keep up with the competition, it rewrote what 2D could do when you give artists a little
I don't
hard-
like your North American design, though, because we got the European design in Australia. So you had the more sleek, flat-looking system, and then you had the controls, which were kind of the same, but you also had the colorful buttons as well. Check out the European version of it. It's beautiful. I love the system.
Where poetry. Virtual Boy. In 1995,
Right. So with the Virtual Boy, right, this is what I heard, and maybe it'll be touched on in the video, but they had a choice of increasing the price point by an extra $100 and having a colored screen and something that was visually comfortable, or they could make it cheaper by $100 and have this ugly red screen, but be more affordable and accessible for, I guess, more families. They chose the ugly option. The rest is history. We're about to hear about it.
Nintendo tried to sell the future of 3D with a headset that didn't go on your head. The Virtual Boy sat on a spindly stand. You leaned into the viewfinder and stared into a world of red and black wireframes. On paper, stereoscopic 3D sounded wild. In practice, it felt awkward.
Yeah, and some of the games are really good, so it's really disappointed it was just such a big eyesore, literally. It bewilders me that Nintendo are bringing this back as part of their online pass. You know, the games you can play on the online pass. With that being said, though, I have no issue with just playing them like as an emulation, but they're also trying to sell the headsets and everything to people. It's just like, why? Someone explain that to me.
No portability, no backlight to fight glare, and that fixed stand meant hunching over a table like you were inspecting evidence. The tech was clever, but the experience never melted away. You always felt the device. The library didn't help. There were flashes of fun. Mario's Tennis, Wario Land, Tolero Boxer, but not enough to justify a pricey, niche machine that parents didn't understand and kids couldn't easily share. Rumors of headaches and eye strains spread faster than word-of-mouth praise, and store demos often showcased the clunkiest parts.
They also tried to spread rumors that it was linked to the Big C as well, but they had to nip that in the bud fast because you're looking at a defamation case if you start saying crap like that.
Posture, the red tint, the novelty wearing off after 5 minutes. Within a year, Nintendo pulled the plug. Compared to the evergreen Game Boy sitting in the same aisles, the Virtual Boy looked like a detour, an expensive lesson about what makes future tech actually feel friendly. Still, the experiment mattered. It taught Nintendo that 3D only works when it disappears behind great games and comfortable design. Nintendo 64.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take risks, right? I mean, no successful person on the planet hasn't stumbled on the road to success, and that includes big major companies as well. It's easy to poke fun until they become your best friend again once they bring out a winning product, right?
Summer 1996. Nintendo leaps from sprites to free roam worlds with a boomerang-shaped pad and a brand new idea, the analog stick. Super Mario 64 turned movement into play itself. Tip, tilt, sprint, wall kick, and taught the camera to behave most of the time.
Okay, who are we kidding, guys? The Nintendo 64 camera never behaved. The early 3D era on both PlayStation and Nintendo 64 was hot garbage for the most part. Now, there was an innovative way to control the camera on Mario 64 that was pretty good. Wasn't so bad on Ocarina. And, you know, they're kind of like the standard bearers of the system as well. But you play any other older game, like something even that's good, like Banjo-Kazooie or something like that, and you try to play that for the first time in 2025, and you don't have any control of the camera, you're going to be like, get fudged, mate. You're just not going to put up with that crap. So I always looked at Nintendo 64 as being an awesome console with mostly pretty good games that were cutting edge of the time, but don't all incredibly hold up now. Just my opinion, of course.
Early 3D made the living room the arena. Mario Kart 64 rubber-banded friendships. GoldenEye 007 invented console stealth shooter vibes after school. And Smash Brothers turned a controller into a crowd sport. But the magic had a cost. Cartridges. They loaded fast, they were durable, but they also held far less than CDs and cost more to manufacture.
Yeah, cartridges were already dated at this point. But with that being said, I mean, the technology they have with like little cartridges now, I mean, we're using those in the Nintendo Switch and stuff and playing absolutely amazing games. Sometimes you have to download more data from the internet on top of the cartridge, but we've come a long way. But at the time, yeah, they were pretty primitive compared to what PlayStation was offering.
That single choice pushed studios like Square towards Sony. The PlayStation feasted on sprawling RPGs, while N64 doubled down on instant, kinetic play. Nintendo fought back with clever add-ons. The Rumble Pack made feedback the language, and the Expansion Pack quietly unlocked sharper visuals and entire games like Majora's Mask and Perfect Dark.
I owned the Expansion Pack, and I didn't really notice any difference with any games. I mean, let me know if you guys did. But that's pretty much it. Video Game Guy, please make sure you're giving him a sub. This was a really interesting video. And give us a sub too. Tell us what you think about the early days of Nintendo, guys, in the comments. And we'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.